Honourable Member Kevin Haig.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Tanakwe.
Tēnā koe ho. I want to begin by saying that the Green Party, in many senses, agrees with our Labour colleagues and I paraphrase somewhat here, sir, saying that this bill contains provisions that are a daft, counterproductive waste of time and effort. But unlike our Labour colleagues, because of that, we will be voting against it rather than for it. Mr Speaker, if the bill had instead been a bill that enacted provisions of the Law Commission's report on the misuse of drugs, or even the recommendations from the Law Commission in respect of the matters that this bill covers, we would certainly be voting for it. And we would much rather, sir, that this House debated a bill of that sort rather than the nonsense before us today. There's no question, sir, that many drugs cause harms, and some kind of response by government is required because of that. Nonetheless, it's also true that many New Zealanders make use of drugs, especially, sir, I think alcohol is probably far and away the most used drug in New Zealand. And it's important that the government's response to drugs and drug-related harm reflects an appropriate balance between the benefits that clearly the individuals who use those drugs perceive that they derive from them, and the actual evidence-based harms that result from those drugs. The Green Party's policy, in fact, is that a drug-free lifestyle is the best lifestyle to have. But we recognise that for many people that's not the kind of lifestyle that they will lead. And so we say that a government's response to drugs must be one that is consistent, so deals with drugs in a consistent way based on their harms and derives its assessment of those harms based on good quality scientific evidence. It's also important that the response should be, as both Ian Lees-Galloway and Grant Robertson have said in this debate tonight, a response that is focused on reducing the health-related harm rather than a punitive response to offending. The Law Commission's report, Controlling and Regulating Drugs, a review of the Misuse of Drugs Act 1975, provides us with an excellent springboard, an excellent starting point for precisely that kind of response for the first time in New Zealand. In many ways, sir, the bill before us represents the antithesis of that kind of response. It represents the very worst aspects of the way that governments of all stripes have actually responded to drug-related issues. It's ham-fisted, slow to respond to problems that have existed for some time. I mean, take these synthetic cannabinoids. The Minister is rushing this SOP into the bill so fast that the public has no say at all in the new provisions. Yet these are products that have been on retail shelves, in fact, for 5 years. So there's no need for that urgency. So ham-fisted, easily avoided in respect of the three provisions that the Green Party has expressed objections, those related to utensils, pseudoephedrine and these synthetic cannabinoids. In fact, people who would be committing offences under these particular provisions of the bill will simply make small adjustments to their behaviour and be able to continue to do so with no real change. So an awful lot of time, energy and effort will have gone into achieving nothing. Creates harms to others, and Grant Robertson has just expressed some of those. He's a person that Minister Dunn, in fact, encourages when he gets a cold to visit his general practitioner, to sit in the waiting room and give his cold to other people there, thereby increasing the amount of illness in New Zealand society. Is that the kind of response that we want? I don't think so. It reflects the disproportionate response to the actual harms related to these particular provisions. And lastly, sir, and I drew attention to this in the committee stage around this bill, it actually does violence to parliamentary process, and I've mentioned that in relation to the synthetic cannabinoids, and also to principles of lawmaking. And I spoke in the second reading about how the provisions related to utensils are extremely poor drafting of New Zealand law. I'm not going to repeat those same arguments that I've made in earlier stages of the debate around this bill in relation to utensils, pseudoephedrine, and the minister's sweeping powers, in fact, relating to more or less any substance at all. When the minister talks about provisions to be able to control the supply of synthetic cannabinoids, but in fact the provisions in this bill go much, much further than that, any substance at all that might cause harm. In the debate in this House we've talked about psychoactive substances, and again the bill is not restricted to psychoactive substances at all. Minister Dunn, when this bill is passed, will be able to ban for 12 months more or less any substance at all. And I drew attention to the fact that he would be able to ban salt. Is that truly the kind of outcome this House wants? Yet it is exactly the kind of outcome that results from the ad hoc and ham-fisted way that governments have gone about drug-making policy. Sorry, drug policy making, sir. Lastly, sir, I want to. I can edit that from the video. I'll be fine. Lastly, sir, I wanted to draw attention of the House to a comment made by Minister Dunn, the Honourable Peter Dunn, in the committee stage, because the Honourable Heather Roy and I both spoke in the committee stage against the provisions that he was attempting to introduce into the bill in relation to these substances. And the Minister, speaking from the chair, made the comment that Heather Roy and I had never encountered a drug that we didn't like. I draw this to the attention of the House, sir, because I found that comment both to be extremely offensive, but also reflective of exactly the kind of empty rhetoric that has characterised government's failed responses to the harms related to drugs. It's the kind of empty rhetoric that has characterised the war on drugs that clearly, if it's been waged for as long as Paul Hutchison has reminded the House that it has been, has failed. It's not only failing, it has failed. What we need, sir, is not the kind of rhetoric that Peter Dunn espouses in the House. What we need, sir, is actually goodwill and good faith, a preparedness to listen to each other, a preparedness to set aside preconceived ideas of how we go about solving this problem, and a commitment instead to work with each other and to think about constructive and novel approaches that actually will reflect the reality of drugs in New Zealand. And so that's exactly what the Law Commission's report provided us with the opportunity to do. I cannot believe in the time that was available to draft this bill that we could not instead have translated the Law Commission's recommendations in relation to utensils, pseudoephedrine and synthetic cannabinoids and put those into law instead, and then we would have had a bill that we would all be voting for and that actually would have achieved some good. Thank you, sir.
I call the honourable member